The story opens on a Saturday afternoon in a mid-sized American town, the kind of place where the volunteer fire hall doubles as a community center, where handmade banners hang from folding tables, and where the smell of donated baked goods and coffee is indistinguishable from the smell of civic goodwill. A charity auction is in its final hour. The cause is a veterans support organization, a local chapter that provides housing assistance, counseling referrals, and transitional support to veterans returning to civilian life. The event has gone well. Quilts, hunting packages, restaurant gift certificates, and weekend getaways have all moved through the auction block with appropriate enthusiasm. The crowd is mostly local: farmers, business owners, teachers, retirees, a scattering of younger families. They are the kind of people who show up to these things not just because they want the items, but because showing up is what people in places like this do. The auctioneer, a barrel-chested man named Carl, who has been running these events for 20 years, announces the final lot of the day with practiced ceremony. He calls it the headline item. What he means is, this is what people actually came for. A day of training alongside a retired Navy SEAL, 4 hours at a local facility, learning from a man who spent 2 decades doing things most people only see in movies. The crowd responds with the particular sound of an audience that is both impressed and slightly unsure whether they are allowed to be. The retired SEAL steps forward. His name is introduced by Carl as Thomas Grady, Tom, to everyone who knows him, and the audience sees him for the first time. A man in his mid-50s, solidly built, but not theatrical about it, wearing a plain button-down shirt and the specific kind of stillness that comes not from composure, but from having been in enough loud places that quiet no longer feels like an absence. He nods at the crowd without smiling, which the crowd reads correctly as respectful rather than cold. He is not a performer. He is here because the organization asked him, and he said yes, because saying yes to things that matter is the only philosophy he has carried intact from his service into his civilian life. Carl begins the bidding. Numbers rise at a reasonable pace, a few competitive paddles in the front rows, some good-natured back and forth. The crowd is engaged, generous, enjoying themselves. The auction is nearly over, the day is nearly done. And then, from somewhere near the back of the hall, from a row of folding chairs where several younger attendees are seated who have clearly come with parents or grandparents rather than on their own initiative, a hand goes up, a teenager's hand. Holding not a bidding paddle, but something small and metal, raised with a certainty that does not match the hesitance you might expect from someone that age in this room. The auctioneer stops mid-sentence. Tom Grady's eyes find the back of the room. The chapter ends before anyone speaks, before anyone asks what the teenager is holding, only on the image of a metal object catching the light of the volunteer hall in a hand that shouldn't, by any logic of this setting, be bidding on anything. His name is Caleb. He is 17 years old, dark-haired, average height, wearing a grey hoodie and the particular expression of someone who made a decision that frightened him and then made it anyway. He is seated beside his grandfather, a retired plumber named Earl who drove them both here this morning, without fully understanding why Caleb needed to come. Earl knew about the auction because it was in the local paper, and Caleb had seen the listing and gone quiet in a specific way that Earl, who has known this boy his entire life, recognized as meaning something rather than nothing. Caleb did not bid when Carl opened the lot. He did not raise a paddle. He doesn't have one, having only attended as a guest. What he raised was something he brought from home, kept in the front pocket of his hoodie since early this morning. A dog tag. Military issue, stamped with a name and a service number, worn smooth at the edges in the way metal gets worn when it has been handled often, and for a long time Caleb is not wealthy. He does not have the kind of money this auction item will require. He knows this. He raised his hand anyway, because this was not, in his understanding, about money. The audience understands that Caleb did not come here to bid on an experience. He came here to find something, or return something, or say something, and the auction simply became the occasion. The room has noticed the raised hand now. A ripple of attention moves through the seated crowd, people craning, whispering, the auctioneer Carl pausing in the professionally calibrated way of someone deciding in real time how to handle an unscripted moment. He does not call out Caleb's number because Caleb has no number. He looks at the boy and, because Carl has been running these events for 2 decades and has developed a reliable instinct for when something real is happening inside his structured proceedings, he says simply, "Son, did you want to say something?" The crowd goes quieter than it has been at any point in the afternoon. Earl puts a hand on Caleb's arm, not to stop him, but the way you touch someone you love when you can see they are about to do something that costs them. Caleb stands up. He is taller standing than he looked sitting. He holds the dog tag out in front of him, not dramatically, just clearly, the way you hold something out when you want people to see that it is real. He says, in a voice that is steadier than his age might suggest he could manage in this moment, "I think this belongs to him." He means Tom Grady. He means the man standing at the front of the room, who is now looking at Caleb with an expression the audience cannot yet read, but that the narration notes has changed, shifted, become something more careful than it was 30 seconds ago. The chapter ends on that look, on whatever Tom Grady sees when he looks at a boy holding a piece of metal from across a volunteer fire hall. The audience does not yet know what he sees. They need to find out. Tom Grady walks toward the back of the room. This is not a dramatic stride. It is the unhurried movement of a man who has learned that urgency, performed without cause, costs credibility. The crowd parts instinctively as he moves. Carl lowers his microphone. Bidding has, without anyone formally saying so, paused. Tom reaches Caleb's row and stops. He looks at the dog tag in the boy's outstretched hand. He does not take it immediately. The narration lingers here on his face, on the stillness of him, on the way his jaw tightens almost imperceptibly, in the way a face tightens when something surfaces that a person has spent time learning not to let surface. He looks at the tag for a long moment. Then he looks at Caleb. He asks one question. His voice is even calm. But the audience hears the thing underneath the calm, the thing that calm is working to contain. Caleb answers that he got it from his mother. This answer does not explain anything. It raises 3 new questions for everyone it settles. Tom looks at the boy's face, really looks at it, the way you look when you are trying to find something in a face rather than simply see it. The narration does not yet tell the audience what he finds there, or whether he finds it. The dog tag belongs to, or rather belonged to, a man named Danny Rourke. The name is read by Carl, who has leaned in close enough to see without touching, because Carl understands instinctively that he is a witness right now rather than a participant. Danny Rourke. The narration delivers this name quietly, without flourish, because it is the kind of name that doesn't need decoration. It will be explained in time. For now it is enough to know that Tom Grady hears that name and closes his eyes for 1 second, just one, and then opens them again. He takes the dog tag from Caleb's hand. He holds it in his palm and looks at it in the way you look at an object that was not supposed to exist anymore, that you had filed away in the category of things gone from the world. Earl, Caleb's grandfather, watches all of this from his seat and understands that he drove his grandson somewhere more important than a charity auction today. Caleb watches Tom Grady hold the tag and sees something he was not entirely sure he would see. Recognition. Confirmation. He came here not knowing with certainty that this man was who he thought, and now he knows. The audience is now carrying 3 interlocking questions: who Danny Rourke was, how Caleb's mother had his tag, and what the relationship is between all of these people. And the chapter ends with those questions firmly in place, and the first answer still 2 chapters away. Tom asks Caleb and Earl to wait. He speaks briefly to one of the event organizers, and within 5 minutes the 3 of them are seated in a small side room off the main hall, a folding table, metal chairs, a window looking out onto a parking lot in the late afternoon light. Carl brings 3 cups of coffee that nobody asked for, sets them down and withdraws. Tom sits with the dog tag on the table in front of him and begins to talk, not because he is a man who talks easily about difficult things, but because this boy came here with this object for a reason, and Tom owes the reason a hearing. He talks about Danny Rourke. He and Danny trained together, deployed together, spent 11 years operating in places and conditions that Tom still doesn't discuss in full with anyone outside the community of people who were there. Danny was 3 years younger than Tom, from the same state, different town. He was the kind of man who made every room feel more organized just by being in it. Not because he was loud or commanding, but because he was reliable in a way that went deeper than performance. You knew, with Danny, that he would be exactly where he said he would be, doing exactly what he said he would do, right up until the moment he wasn't. Tom does not look at Caleb while he says this. He looks at the table. His voice does not break. The audience understands that he has had a long time to carry this, and that carrying it has not made it lighter, only more familiar. Danny Rourke died on a deployment 12 years ago. Tom was with him. The narration does not provide tactical details. This is not that kind of story, and the audience does not need them. What it provides is the human fact of it. Tom was the last person to speak to Danny. And the last thing Danny said was an ordinary thing, something unremarkable. And that ordinariness is the part Tom has never been able to let go of, the way enormous endings arrive disguised as nothing at all. He tells Caleb this without editorializing. He is simply accounting for the facts, as men of his training tend to do with the things they cannot change. Danny's personal effects were sent to his family. Tom assumed the dog tag was among them, as standard protocol. He assumed it had been in the possession of Danny's family ever since. He assumed, in the way you assume things about the belongings of the dead when you have no reason to check, that it was somewhere safe and that he would never see it again. He looks at it now on the table in front of him and says, almost to himself, in a voice that is honest, in the way you are honest when you forget an audience is present, that he thought about Danny every day for the first 3 years, and then every week, and then less often, which is not, he says, the same as less. The audience now loves Tom Grady, and the chapter ends with him finally looking at Caleb and asking the question the audience has needed, answered since chapter 2. Who is your mother? Caleb's mother is named Claire Rourke. She kept her married name even though her husband, Danny Rourke's younger brother, passed away from an illness 6 years after Danny's death. She is 42 years old, currently working 2 jobs, raising Caleb largely with the practical assistance of Earl, her late husband's father, who has been her consistent anchor since she became a widow at 34. She is not at the auction today because she is working a Saturday shift. She knows Caleb came here. She is the one who gave him the dog tag this morning with instructions that were simpler and harder than any instructions Caleb has received. Find Thomas Grady. Give it back to him. Tell him it's time. Caleb delivers this to Tom as plainly as he received it, because he understands that his job today was to be a messenger and that the message doesn't belong to him. Tom listens to this without moving. He looks at the boy, really looks at him again, and now the audience can see what he was looking for the first time. In the fire hall he was looking for Danny, and he finds him, not dramatically but unmistakably, in the line of Caleb's jaw and the particular stillness of his eyes. Caleb is Danny Rourke's nephew. He is the blood continuation of his uncle's life, sitting across of a folding table from the man who was with Danny at the end. The dog tag, it emerges, has been in Claire's possession since the year after Danny died. His own mother, Caleb's grandmother on that side, now gone, had kept it. Before she died, she gave it to Claire because Claire was the one she trusted most, and because she said she felt it belonged with someone who would know when to do something with it rather than simply holding it. Claire held it for 11 years. She never sent it back, not because she forgot, but because she wasn't sure Tom Grady was someone who could receive it, whether enough time had passed, whether it would help or harm, whether the gesture would mean anything or only reopen something better, left quiet. And then she saw the notice in the paper about the charity auction, saw Tom Grady's name, and understood that the moment had arrived. She told Caleb he gave more than service. He deserves to know that Danny's family still remembers what that cost him. Caleb is not sure he understood everything his mother meant when she said this. But he understood enough to get in his grandfather's truck at 8 in the morning and come here and hold up a dog tag in a room full of adults who didn't know what they were watching. The chapter ends with Tom sitting very still, the dog tag back in his hand, and the audience understanding that this is not simply the story of a dog tag being returned. It is the story of a grief being witnessed, finally, fully, by the people it belongs to. Tom Grady lives alone in a house on the edge of town that is clean and functional and has the quality of a place that meets every practical need and almost no others. He grows tomatoes in the summer because Danny once told him that growing something is the closest a person gets to understanding patience. He volunteers with the veterans organization that ran this auction not because it heals him. He is skeptical of the word healing, as it is commonly applied, but because being useful is the only substitute he has found for being operational. He has been married twice. Both marriages ended not with acrimony, but with a specific kind of mutual exhaustion, the particular fatigue that comes from living with someone who is physically present and emotionally stationed somewhere unreachable. He does not blame his ex-wives. He understands with the clarity that comes from years of honest self-assessment that he has spent a significant portion of his adult life grieving someone in a way he never formally acknowledged as grief. He thought he was fine. He was functional. He did not know the difference for a long time between the two. The narration does not make Tom pitiable. It makes him real, which is more useful and more moving than pity. He is a man who has contributed genuinely to the world around him. He has trained dozens of young people over the years, not in combat, but in discipline, focus, and the basic life skill of being willing to do hard things. Several of them have reached out over the years to tell him what it meant. He received these messages with gratitude and a faint sense of dislocation, the way you feel when someone thanks you for something that cost you nothing compared to what you've already lost. What Caleb's arrival this afternoon has done, what the dog tag on the table is doing, is name something Tom has been carrying unnamed for 12 years. When grief goes unnamed, it shapes everything and explains nothing. Tom does not say any of this aloud in the side room. He is not that kind of man in that kind of moment. But the audience has been given it, and they carry it into the second half of the story the way you carry something you received without knowing you needed it. The chapter ends with Caleb asking Tom, with the uncomplicated directness of a 17-year-old who has been asked to do a hard thing and done it, whether he ever got to say goodbye to Danny. And the room goes quiet around the question. Tom's answer to Caleb's question takes a long time to arrive. Not because he is evasive, but because the honest answer requires him to go somewhere he has not gone aloud, in the presence of another person, in many years. He talks around it first, recounts the last patrol, the last morning, the unremarkable ordinariness of it. He describes the way Danny laughed at something stupid one of the other guys said at breakfast. He describes the color of the sky. He provides the frame without yet putting anything in it. Caleb does not push. Earl, who has barely spoken this entire time, is watching Tom with the quiet attention of an older man who recognizes what he is witnessing. Not combat, not heroism, but the much more common and much less acknowledged ordeal of surviving someone you loved. The narration stays close to Tom's face, reading it the way you read a landscape for weather. Something is building. The audience can feel it. The story is in the pause between breathing in and breathing out. What Tom never got to say was not complicated. It was not a speech. The unsaid thing, when it finally comes, is almost shockingly ordinary. And that ordinariness is precisely what makes it devastating. He tells Caleb, "I never told him he was the best man I ever worked alongside. I thought there'd be more time." He says it the way you say something you have rehearsed so many times in private that saying it aloud feels both necessary and slightly unreal. He does not cry, his voice does not break, but his hands, flat on the table, press slightly harder against the surface, a small, involuntary tell that the narration notes without commentary. Caleb watches him. Then Caleb does something the audience does not expect from a 17-year-old at a folding table in a side room off a volunteer fire hall. He says, "My mum says that about you." Tom looks up. Caleb continues, slowly, as if locating the words from something memorized. "She says my uncle always told her that Thomas Grady was the best man he ever worked alongside. The room holds this. Tom holds this. The audience holds this. Because what just happened, quietly without ceremony, in a room that smells of donated baked goods and old coffee, is that a 12-year gap between two people who loved the same man has been closed by the simplest and most necessary kind of exchange. Being told that you were seen, by someone who is no longer here to say it. Nearly an hour has passed. The auction hall has not fully dispersed. Carl made a quiet announcement that the final lot would be concluded shortly, and most of the crowd stayed, not because they needed to, but because the instinct of a small community is to wait when something unresolved is happening among its members. Some people got more coffee. Others stood in clusters near the exit, talking, angling their eyes toward the side room door every few minutes. The Veterans Organization Director, a woman named Pat, 58 years old, former Army logistics officer, has been managing the situation with the practiced calm of someone who knows when to let things take their time. She told Carl to hold the lot. She told the remaining crowd that things would wrap up soon. She offered no explanation, because she sensed correctly that no explanation was needed. Something true was happening, and true things tend to explain themselves when they're finished. Outside the window of the side room, the October afternoon is softening toward early dark. The parking lot holds cars with Veterans Organization bumper stickers, a few pickup trucks, a station wagon with a child's drawing taped to the back window. It is an ordinary Saturday. It has become something else. When Tom, Caleb, and Earl emerge from the side room, the crowd that remains reads the room with the collective social intelligence of people who have known each other for years. They see Tom Grady, a man who walked into that side room collected and walks out of it slightly more open, as if something that was held shut has been let go, just enough, in the way that is not weakness but its opposite. They see a teenager who came here today with more courage than most adults would have managed. They see Earl, who drove him, which is its own kind of love. Carl, bless him, does not rush to his microphone. He waits until Tom nods at him. Then he steps back to the podium and, with the instinct of a man who knows when ceremony is appropriate and when it should serve rather than perform, he says simply that the lot will be donated back to the organization rather than sold today. That the item was outbid, not with money, but with something that the organization is honored to have witnessed. He does not explain further. He doesn't need to. The remaining crowd absorbs this and responds not with applause, though some of that comes quietly, but with a specific kind of respectful silence that a community produces when it understands that something real happened among them today, and that the appropriate response is to honor it rather than narrate it. In the parking lot afterward, in the grey-gold light of an October early evening, Tom asks Caleb what he wants to do with his life. It is a question Tom asks because he is genuinely curious, and because in his experience, the best thing you can do for a 17-year-old who just did something harder than he probably realizes is treat him like someone whose future matters. Caleb answers with the particular combination of clarity and uncertainty that belongs to that age. He is thinking about the military. He has been thinking about it for 2 years. He hasn't told his mother yet because he is not sure she can bear another person she loves going into that life. He tells Tom this without knowing why he's telling him, except that Tom is the first person he has encountered who might actually understand both sides of that equation. Tom listens without his face doing what most adults' faces do when a teenager admits something vulnerable. It does not shift into advice mode or concern mode or the expression of someone preparing a speech. He just listens, and then he says, "If you decide you want to talk it through with someone who's been there, I'm not hard to find." Earl, leaning against the truck with his hands in his pockets, overhears this and says nothing but feels something he will describe later to Claire as a door opening, not dramatically, not with noise, but in the way of something that has been closed long enough that you stopped noticing it was closed. The dog tag is in Tom's jacket pocket now. He kept it. Not because it was offered as a gift, but because Caleb and Claire intended it as a return, and Tom understood that accepting it was the right thing to do. He will not put it away when he gets home. He will set it on the windowsill above the sink in the kitchen where the tomatoes used to be, where he can see it in the morning. Not as a wound, as a reminder that Danny Rourke was loved by more people than Tom knew, and that love did not end when Danny did. It simply changed hands, moved through the years in the keeping of a woman he never met, and a boy who held up a dog tag in a fire hall and spoke 2 sentences in a steady voice in front of a room full of adults. Tom shakes Caleb's hand in the parking lot, which is how he shakes everyone's hand. But he holds it one moment longer, and the audience understands what the extra moment means without needing it explained. The chapter ends with Earl starting the truck and Caleb climbing in and looking out the window at Tom Grady, still standing in the parking lot, holding his hand up once in farewell, and Tom lifting his hand back. 3 days after the auction, Tom Grady calls Claire. He finds her number through Earl, who gives it without hesitation. The call lasts 47 minutes. The narration does not reproduce it in full. Some conversations belong only to the people inside them, but it gives the audience its shape. Tom tells her about Danny, the specific things, the breakfast, the sky, the unremarkable last morning. The things he has never told anyone because no one has ever asked in a way that made him understand they could receive it. Claire listens. She already knows the outline of what happened. She has known for 12 years. In the way military families know things, through official channels and community whispers and the silences of people who were there, but knowing the outline and being given the interior are different, and Tom gives her the interior. He tells her the thing he told Caleb, that Danny was the best man he ever served alongside. Saying it the second time is easier. Not because it costs less, but because the right recipient makes the cost feel like purpose rather than loss. Claire tells Tom about Danny as a brother. The younger sibling stories, the ones that don't exist in any military record or official remembrance, the way Danny used to burn every piece of toast he ever made and refused to acknowledge it. The way he cried at the end of movies he'd already seen and knew were sad. The way he drove 12 hours to be at Claire's wedding to his brother without being asked, and arrived with flowers he'd forgotten to wrap, so he just held them out in a gas station bag and grinned. Tom receives all of this. He is quiet on his end of the call, but it is a different quiet than usual. Not the quiet of containment, but the quiet of being full. When the call ends, Tom sits in his kitchen for a while. The dog tag is on the windowsill. The last light of a Tuesday afternoon comes through the glass and rests on it, on the stamped letters of a name that had a face, a laugh, a gas station bag of unwrapped flowers, and a partner who was with him at the end and needed, for 12 years, to be told that it mattered. The story closes here, not on resolution as an event, but on resolution as a state. A man at his kitchen table, a name on a tag in the last of the light, and the particular piece of something that has been carried alone for a very long time being, at last, shared. The audience leaves with grief and gratitude held in equal measure, which is the only honest ending this story could have.